Do you have a power adapter?
I didn't bring one because I didn't think I'd be.
What kind does it usually take?
Just the regular, this kind.
I don't know what that is.
It's
Oh, it'll have enough. Because how long are you guys going to go?
3 hours maybe.
Okay. At least it'll allow me to run home and grab a computer. All right. So, pin. Okay. So, I don't know where to put it though. You hold up for a second. Just try. Oh, try to come in some things.
I'll ask them to talk.
Yeah. Hold over here now.
So they have a Z feed, so is that right, Jen? Okay. So did I understand right that the additional jurors who aren't part of the original 30 will be watching through the Zoom feed to that moment?
That's a good idea. They won't be watching, they'll be listening. There's not a screen in there.
Oh, there's that.
I don't think so.
Oh.
Is there a screen in there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, I got it. Sorry, we're gonna be on TV.
Does the camera add 5 pounds? Yeah,
I think so.
I think it takes it off.
good. Are you using some kind of filter?
There is one of those. Yeah. You guys want to have the trial in a yeah. Star Wars? Can you hear it?
Yeah, it doesn't sound good, doesn't sound clear.
Oh, that's great.
Can't even ask to talk, I couldn't hear you either, so I'm sorry
Oh, really?
for interrupting.
Even coffee.
Yeah, we could, we just now,
It was on mute,
that tends to,
That helps.
yeah,
so, but it's not clear at all.
it's not, I mean, I could barely understand what you guys are saying. It's fairly loud, but
Hmm. Let's try.
Speak up anyway, because if we shut the fan.
Test, Liz, test.
Testing.
One. What?
that was clear.
So is the microphone in?
It's on this.
So it should be able to pick.
When you guys are standing at the podium, I'm sure it'll be better than the judge.
You better stay here, I'll stand.
Those chairs seem a little close there.
They are, I think it is just for.
Test. Myself. I hear before. Blah, blah, test, test. 1, 2. Test. Test. 1, 2.
Can you hear me, Liz? Can you hear me now?
Where'd you go, Liz?
Better,
Okay.
All right.
just speak up, I suppose.
Because we could use the mic on the computer, but I think it works.
Jared, do you want to turn that computer around?
Oh, yes.
Should I turn on any of the jurors, or do you want to turn them off now? Should I start bringing them in?
Are we ready to bring in the camera? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. I don't want it to be
Yeah.
distracting to the I wanted it to turn, yeah, there you go.
Had the cords kind of wrapped around there. Can you see that, Brad? You want to see it? Okay.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Ms. Popa, you're in chair number 1. Ms. Thompson, you're number 2. Mr. Packer, you're here in 3. Mr. Schoen, you're here in 4. Ms. Friend, next to the window, here, you, thank you.
Notice there are marks on the floor. That's to try to keep the 6 feet apart. It's up, it's kind of use it. That's what they're there for, so.
How nice.
Mr. Mogensen, you're here, chair 6. Garcia Gutierrez, you're here, chair. I apologize, thank you. Novacek, all right, you're here, turn 9. Thank you, please remove your hat. Please, thank you. Mr. Pinkerton, chair 10, please, thank you. Next is number 11. And then 14. 14. You can go on in, sorry, Shirley. 15. It's that one right over there by the window. Thank you. No. 15. And you want to see the last one?
Yes.
Okay, here, 12 here. Thank you.
Thank you.
The white marks on the floor are where your chair belongs. They're trying to keep everybody 6 feet apart. So it's kind of awkward. Those on the inside of the tables are kind of on the outside. You know, have to keep their chairs on the outside.
Thank you. You're just gonna be right here. Okay. Okay. That's it. Okay. 24. Number 18. Yes. And stop. Six.
Yes, you're saying. Show them.
36 is going to replace 18. Yes. 18. Right. Thank you. I'll go get it and then I'll take the others and also, sorry, Ryan Bartle. No. Sure.
Welcome. My name is Susan Strong. I'm one of the 8 district court judges that we have here in Lancaster County. The bailiff who brought you in is Liz Hussey. And my court reporter seated over here to your right is Rita Lowe's. You have been selected as this jury panel for the jury term at Lancaster County Court. The first thing I want to do is explain why we're down here this morning instead of in one of our courtrooms. As you know, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the CDC guidelines and local health department directives. They can't hear me?
I do turn off the thing.
I could go up to the podium too. Maybe this will help. I don't know.
It won't amplify.
It's not going to amplify. Okay. Well. All right. Can you hear me better now? I'll try to talk louder too. As you know, due to the coronavirus pandemic, we've had to implement certain guidelines and health directives from the CDC and our local health department as well. Those require everyone to wear a face mask or other face covering and maintain a social distance of 6 feet from each other. We've got marked on the floor in white tape where your chair should be to allow you to maintain 6 feet away from your neighbor. So if you want to move your chair to that tape, you'll be 6 feet apart and we can proceed. We've had to refrain from holding jury trials during the last few months, but we're starting up again. This is due to cooperation from other of our county officials and law enforcement. This is normally a training room for the Lincoln Police Department, and they have graciously agreed to let us use it for certain instances such as this, which we're going to be down here for voir dire. If you are selected as a juror, we will eventually move up to our large courtroom, courtroom number 30, up on the 3rd floor. So we won't be down here forever. If everyone could turn off their cell phones or silence them, that would be helpful. I am aware that not everyone is excited about following the CDC guidelines and health directives, but you know, we need to keep everybody safe, and we don't know who among us has health conditions that may make it extremely important that they maintain their social distancing and that everyone around them wear a face mask. So we do thank you for your cooperation. And you are to wear a face mask or a face shield, which will be provided to you if you would like one during the entire time that we are in the Hall of Justice. That's this building here. In a few minutes, we'll begin voir dire. This is a process where the court will determine whether you can, without fear, favor, prejudice, or sympathy, and in sound judgment, render a just and fair verdict on the evidence presented and the instructions given by the court. If you're ultimately selected as a juror, you will take the juror's oath and become, in effect, officers of the court. It is the duty of the judge to conduct the trial in accordance with the rules of law and procedure and to maintain order and decorum, and to instruct you on the law that you are to apply to the facts as you as jury find them. This is a short trial. It is estimated that it will only take 2 days. So the case set for trial on this date is the state of Nebraska versus Adris Khalaf at CR 20-934. Is counsel for the state ready to proceed there?
Yes, Your Honor.
And counsel for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, then this is the state of Nebraska versus Adris Khalaf. The defendant is seated over here to my far right with his attorney, Brad Sip, seated next to him. And the state is over here represented by county attorneys Jessica Murphy and Matt Miller. It is charged by the county attorney in this case that Adris Khalaf, on or about July 15, 2020, in Lancaster County, Nebraska, then and there being a person subject to the Sex Offender Registration Act, hereinafter the Act, and having received notice of his obligations under the Act, did falsify the registration or verification information or form, or did fail to provide or timely update law enforcement of any of the information required to be provided by the Sex Offender Registration Act, contrary to the form of the statutes in such cases made and provided, and against the peace and dignity of the state of Nebraska. To this charge, the defendant has pled not guilty, and it will be the question of his guilt or innocence of this charge that you'll be asked to decide if you are chosen as jurors on this case. From all of your names submitted, the clerk has chosen strictly by random 30 names, and those are the 30 of you that are in this room. There are others that are in an overflow room who are hearing and watching us so that they can also participate. The attorneys for both sides will ask you some questions, and this is called voir dire. Those of you who are in the overflow room who do not have a number between 1 and 30 will not have to respond to the questioning, but you should please pay close attention because you may yet be called to serve if it is determined that one of these 30 folks in front of me cannot. So after voir dire, each side has the opportunity to strike a certain number of people from the 30 so that we end up with 12 plus 2 alternates. These strikes are called peremptory challenges. The final 14 people then will constitute the 12-person jury and 2 alternates that will hear the case. First thing I need to do is to ask everyone to stand and raise your right hand. Everyone in this room as well as the overflow room. Do you and each of you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will answer truly all questions put to you touching your qualifications to serve as jurors in the case of State versus Khalaf, in which this jury is being impaneled? If so, please answer, I will. Thank Thank you. Please have a seat. And ladies and gentlemen, as I was mentioning earlier, the next part of the trial is jury selection. It's called voir dire. It's a French term meaning to speak the truth. No one is going to be trying to embarrass you, and no one is trying to pry into your personal lives. However, they will be attempting to find out what your thoughts are about the legal system and perhaps this particular case in order to assess your ability to serve as jurors on their case. Prior to today, you all filled out the jury questionnaire. The attorneys and I each have a copy of those. So we already know some of the basic things about you, but they may want to follow up on some of those things as well. Does anyone know any of the folks that I've introduced here thus far? No? All right. And just in case you're wondering for your schedule, once we're finished down here this morning, I'm going to excuse you and have you report upstairs at 1:30 p.m. That's if you're selected. If you're not selected, of course, you'll be free to go. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. I will go ahead and allow then Ms. Murphy to begin her voir dire.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Murphy, and I, along with Mr. Meller, represent the state of Nebraska in this action. I am going to do my best to speak up. My voice usually carries, but I am wearing a mask. But if at any point you are not able to hear me, please feel free to raise your hand, speak up, and let me know. And I will ask that you do the same thing. We have a big room here. There are microphones in front of you, but they are not amplifying, just so you know. So I will ask that you speak up so that I can hear what you have to say. As Judge Strong indicated, we are here today in the case of State versus Idris Khalaf. Mr. Khalaf is charged with a Sex Offender Registration Act violation, and you all are the potential jurors in this case. Through this process of jury selection, it is our opportunity to find the most fair and impartial jury for both Mr. Khalaf and for the state. So as we go through here today, I will be asking you questions. Some of them may be personal, and I promise it isn't to pry. It isn't to embarrass. It's just because we need to know what prior experiences that you have in order to pick that most fair jury. If at any point I ask you something that you are really uncomfortable talking about in front of the group, please let me know. And then we can discuss possibly being able to come to an arrangement where you don't have to talk about that in front of the entire jury panel. So please just let me know if there's something that you need to speak about only in front of the judge as well as the parties and Mr. Khalaf. Now, you've all been given the names of all of us and have said that you don't recognize us. I'm going to give you the names of other attorneys in the county attorney's office. And I just ask that you let me know if any of you know any of these attorneys, and I'll wait until the end. And if you know any of them, please raise your hand. The elected county attorney, Pat Condon, Bruce Prenda, Chris Turner, Doug Sear, Mary Norrie, Anna Marks, Christy Bauer, Jennifer Holloway, Dan Zig, Jim Roque, Jeff Mathers, Eric Miller, Jeremy Levine, Morgan Smith, Charles Bird or Charlie Bird, Amy Goodrow, Chris Seifert, Chris Reed, Jason Cooper, Steve Schmidt, Erica Press, Ashley Bonet Stark, Ryan Decker, Maureen Lamsky, Julie Maruz, Haley Messerschmidt, Dan Donnelly, Eric Sinowicki, Danielle Kerr, Tom Gage, Maureen Larson, Tyson Moody, Amber Schlody, or John Ward. Does anybody know any of those people?
No.
Seeing no hands, thank you. I'm also going to read the names of some potential witnesses that will be in this case. Please let me know if you know any of these people. Shauna Baird, Christy Hulsey, Zara Khalaf, Murat Khalaf, or Justin Armstrong. Does anybody know any of those people? Has anybody here served on a jury before? All right, now I see a couple of hands. So I'm going to start here in the front. Are you Mr. Pinkerton?
Yes.
When did you serve on a jury?
Was an alternate a year ago.
Okay. What type of case was it?
It was a motor vehicle homicide case.
And you mentioned that you were an alternate. So
I sat
ultimately,
through the trial and then I was not selected
to deliberate. All right, well, who are the other hands that I saw? Okay, are you Mr., is it Grossi?
Yeah.
Okay, what type of trial did you, were you a jury?
Was for an assault.
So, and when was that?
Back in 2014.
Were you the foreperson of that jury? And what was the verdict?
Not guilty.
All right, I saw one more hand. Where did I see it? Oh, actually two. Okay. We have Mr., is it Cabine? Cabine. Okay, thank you. What type of jury have you sat on?
It was a sexual assault.
When was that?
I want to say it was maybe 3-4 years ago.
Were you the foreperson?
Yes.
What was the verdict?
Not guilty.
And now one more. There we go in the middle here. Mr., is it Regier? Regier, thank you. What type of jury have you sat on?
It was an injury accident,
Okay,
and it was probably 20 years, early 2000.
was it the type of case where the state had brought charges, or was it the case?
No, the person who was injured in the accident was doing the person that.
Okay. Do you remember what the verdict was?
The judge.
Thank you. All right, anybody else that I've missed? Okay, has anybody here previously served as a witness in a trial? I see two. Okay, I'll start up here with you, Ms. Compton. What type of trial were you a witness for?
It was a robbery,
Robbery. When was that?
2007.
When you were a witness in that trial, what were your feelings as you were getting ready to have to testify in court?
Pretty nervous.
Were you
I
nervous?
hadn't done something like that before.
Okay. What were you nervous about?
I was sitting in front of the defendant, so the location of my to the person was a little anxious.
Is everybody in the back able to hear Ms. Compton? Okay. No, if you could speak up just
Okay.
a little bit, if that'd be
Yeah.
all right. So you said you were nervous because you were sitting in front of the defendant, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Did your nervousness have anything to do with your belief about whether or not you could tell the truth?
No.
And you said you ultimately did testify in that trial, is that correct?
Yep.
I saw one more hand in the back middle, Mr. Christensen.
Yeah.
What type of trial were you a witness for?
Driving accident,
When was that?
2019, I believe. 2019 or 2018, one of the two.
And what were your feelings before that trial?
Well, I was nervous just because I'd never done it before, but it's pretty straightforward once I got there.
Okay. And did your nervousness have anything to do with your questioning whether or not you have the ability to tell the truth?
No, just told me what happened.
Okay. It was just a new experience, is that right?
Yep.
Does anybody here have prior experience with law enforcement? If you have, please raise your hands. Any experience whatsoever, contact in some way, traffic tickets, other investigation. I mean, just one-on-one, you talk to a police officer when they were doing their job. All right, I mean, I can raise my hand too. All right. So when we're talking about our experience with law enforcement, is there anybody here who has had what they have considered as a negative experience with law enforcement, something that they walked away with and said, that was not a good experience? Got 1, 2, 3 hands. All right, so I'll start up here. Mr. Mogensen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just What type of contact was that?
Oh, there's a Buster tailgate on game day down on North Bottoms over there, and I was at a private tailgate in a yard, and I stepped into an alley and I had a beer in my hand, and I was actually diversion for it, but they gave me an open container
Mhm.
for it, and I was literally in the alley for like 2 seconds and stepped back up, and I was waved over by a plainclothes officer, and he was making fun of me, said, "That's the most expensive Busch Light you'll ever drink," and gave me a ticket, said, "It's, don't worry, it's just an infraction," and then I got a ticket, and it was a misdemeanor, and, yeah, I was very unpleased with that.
So it sounds like you didn't appreciate that officer's joke at the time, I would say, probably not, no. Did that officer do anything that was outside of his job? Do you think he was following the law and doing his job?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Sorry, go ahead.
One other thing that really upset me is I tried talking to his sergeant about it, and I was bullied out of the police office before I even talked to him.
What do you mean?
The officer I talked to said, "How dare you even think you should be able to come down and talk to the sheriff or to the sergeant?" It was, the office was going through a hard time that day because there was a police shooting the night before in that district. Obviously, the sergeant had better things to do than deal with me.
Mhm.
So I understood that, but I was treated very rudely.
But overall, not a good experience.
Right.
The original officer that gave you the ticket, you said he was doing his job. Is that what you would say?
Yep.
Is there anything about that experience with the original officer and the sergeant that would make you unable to listen to the evidence in this trial, listen to the testimony of a police officer, and render a fair and impartial verdict?
Absolutely.
So you wouldn't hold it against the officer who testified here today, the experience that you had previously with an officer.
Absolutely not.
I saw some other hands.
Nothing but respect for all enforcement.
Thank you. All right. Here, right behind, I have Mr. Nersessian.
Yes, and I apologize for the last question about being a witness. I think I've been, like, divorce cases count for as well, right? So I was a witness.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I used to be a witness during divorce, probably about 10 years ago.
Okay, and so you were a witness in a divorce case 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So you had to testify in front of a judge, would that be right? But there wouldn't have been a jury there, is that correct?
No.
Did you have any feelings before testifying at that hearing?
No feelings at all. I'm a court interpreter, so I'm kind of used to the situation.
Okay, all right, so you weren't necessarily nervous, you kind of knew what you were getting into?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand here in the middle. And I apologize when I take a break here, I don't have a perfect memory, so sometimes I have to take some quick notes. All right, Ms. Damgard, is that correct? Okay, so you've had a prior experience with law enforcement that was not necessarily positive. Will you tell me about that?
I had a cousin who was in a car accident. The car accident involved alcohol. It was a very significant accident. We were in the hospital room with him when the deputy came in and wanted to interrogate him. And it was not appropriate at that time, and was very forceful. So it was just a very uncomfortable situation of trying to stand up for his rights in situations when the officer was trying to get information.
It's not loud enough.
If you could please speak up. I think I just received some information that we're maybe not being loud enough for the people who are over Zoom. So I know this is a big room, but I think that's the message that I just received. Okay, so you had this prior experience with your cousin. Was that here in Lancaster County? In another county? Would that experience with law enforcement in any way make you unable to be a fair juror in this case?
No.
Would you be able to listen to the testimony of a police officer and an employee of the Lancaster Sheriff's Office and be able to give them, be able to reach a fair verdict without considering that prior experience?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, there was another hand in the back, Mr. Christensen.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about the experience with law enforcement.
My tires got slashed out front of my house, so I came out, noticed, called the non-emergency line, and the police officer who came to respond basically tried to blame me
for it somehow. It was like, you must have a girlfriend who's mad, you know, and it ended up being just random kids in the neighborhood.
Slashing tires.
Yep.
Okay. Was that here in Lincoln?
Yep.
Okay. So with that prior experience with, was it a Lincoln Police Department officer?
So,
So would that prior experience with that police officer in any way affect your ability to listen to testimony from law enforcement during this trial and reach a fair verdict?
honestly, I'd probably be a little skeptical with a law enforcement officer, at least at first. I mean, I'd give them the benefit of the doubt and listen to what they have to say, but my initial reaction would be skeptical, honestly.
So you, as you're listening to this police officer, do you remember the name of the police officer?
Lead me over.
Okay, all right, all right. All right, so now I want to move on. As you've all heard, this case is a Sex Offender Registration Act violation. This is not a sexual assault trial, but you've heard the name Sex Offender Registration Act. So you know that in some way there was that type of crime involved at one point. Is there anybody here who has had personal experience, either yourselves or somebody that you know well, who has been the victim of a sexual assault? So are there any, well, hold on, if you could just raise your hands again, please. Any of the people who have raised their hands, with that prior experience with sexual assault in any way affect your ability to hear the evidence and be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
No.
I see a hand from Ms. Damgard. If you don't mind, how would that affect your ability to be a fair and impartial juror?
Just clear, it's personal experience of mine, so being able to listen to the information, not put my own experience in the situation.
If I told you, so this is strictly a registration violation. So we are talking about an address and whether somebody who was supposed to report an address either correctly reported that address or did not correctly report that address. We will not be presenting any kind of evidence that relates to an assault in any way or other. There's no, we're only talking about the registration of an address. Does that affect or does that change, you know, how you think you may be able to sit on the case?
I would be able to keep it open mind.
Sorry, could you speak up?
I would be able to keep it open mind.
You would be? Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what the actual charge is. Does anybody here know what the sex offender registry is? Raise your hand. Okay. I see a lot of hands, so I'm going to talk to somebody I haven't talked to yet. Mr. Mosman, have I talked to you yet?
No.
Okay. Tell me what the sex offender registry is.
I just know if you have a guilty verdict or whatever for the crime, required to register on a public website, get your picture taken, have your address. They're on there for so many years.
Right, right. Does anybody have a different understanding of what the sex offender registry is? Okay. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Moss.
I assume it was where you had to tell all your neighbors that you are a registered sex offender. That's what we're talking about.
Similar. So as Mr. Mosman said, once somebody has a certain conviction, something that makes them eligible for the sex offender registry, then they are required to provide certain information, address, take a picture, other identifying information, and that information is on a public website, as you said. And so then on that public website, I suppose, is how neighbors can find out, you know, where somebody may be living, or if there is somebody who's on the registry who's living in their neighborhood. Is there anybody here? I guess let me ask, other than that information that we've just discussed, what do you think is the purpose of having a sex offender registry? Just go ahead and volunteer. Ms. Hofeld.
Protect victims. Protect the victims.
Protect the victims.
Protect other potential victims.
Okay. Anyone else? In the back, Mr. Griffiths.
Almost like how the UCRs or how that got uniform crime report, it almost how that is to have a controlled record for people to view for their area or for the public.
Okay, so yeah, to let people in the area or in the public know where certain people may be living.
Yeah, just like how the uniform crime reports are that the items or that your local police department does to inform people of what certain crimes that are committed or certain people that are doing those crimes in that area.
Thank you. Anyone else? In the back right, Mr. Opp.
Yeah, I assume that is also the law enforcement. Those offenders, and I believe there's got to be an element of deterrence. This time,
Could you speak up just a little bit? I'm having a little problem hearing you. I'm sorry.
There's got to be an element of deterrence also. If someone was thinking of doing such a crime, maybe that would help deter them from doing the crime.
So you said first helping law enforcement to keep track of certain people, as well as an element of deterrence for people who don't want to be on the sex offender registry. Thank you. Did I see a hand from you, Mr. Hall? Or no, Mr. Post?
I was just gonna say something very similar. Law enforcement helps them keep track if they need to in a case or an investigation. You can check that if you need to. It's a sex offense you're looking into.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Is there anybody here who does not think the state has a legitimate reason to keep a sex offender registry database? You can be honest. Does anybody think that it's, government overreach, that, these people should not be required to give their addresses, give their personal information that can then be shared to the community? Seeing no hands. Is it important that such a requirement be enforced by law enforcement and the government? I see some head nods. Mr. Zaczek, can you explain why?
Yeah, I think for the reasons other people have already talked about, but I would also add, I think for sex offenders, I think that type of crime compared to other crime is particularly insidious, something that is more easily something people keep hidden, as well as something perhaps with more of an addictive nature to it than other crime that is more concerning to be reoccurring than other crimes perhaps. So just my take on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a hand, Mr. Mogensen.
I imagine it has something to do with along the lines of making sure they're not within such a distance to certain places like elementary schools, stuff like that too.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else? So if somebody is required to provide an address and they don't provide a correct address, do you think that should be a violation of the law? Anybody? Yes. Okay. I see Mr. Is it Ariano?
Yeah.
Could you please explain?
I would first want to say that they made the effort to put in their address, and if they mistakenly put in maybe it was the wrong address, but I would first think they made the effort.
Okay, so you want to know what effort they made to provide the address. So are you thinking like typographical errors, like?
I'm definitely thinking that way.
Okay, all right. So if somebody puts in an address and then they look and confirm and say, yes, that's the address that I mean, and that's not the address where they are, or that address changes, and they don't update it, do you think that that should be a violation?
Technically, yes.
Okay,
I do think. But I guess legally, yeah, that should be violated.
okay, so when you say technically, yes, so if you were instructed at the end of this, you're instructed by the law of what is required by the Sex Offender Registration Act, would you be able to fairly apply the law to the facts that are presented here and determine whether or not those facts are a violation under the law? Anybody else have thoughts about that topic? Yes, back here, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the list is only as good as the people that report that information for the list, so, and the awareness that comes with it. So my thinking is that what's the point of having the list if they aren't reporting correctly?
Absolutely. How do we serve the purpose of the sex offender registry if there isn't good information in that registry? Is that correct, what you're saying?
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, up here, Mr. Pinkerton.
Just more in general, I suppose, any law that's not enforced, what good is the law?
Yes, absolutely. What's the purpose of having a law in the book if it's not enforced by law enforcement and then the state? Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Hartmeyer.
Okay, so if you're saying you reported it, but you didn't report the right one.
So I'm not talking specifically about what the evidence is. We're talking kind of in hypotheticals right now.
Okay.
So right now we're talking about in general what the sex offender registry is.
Yep.
And what type of information can be received when we're talking about whether or not somebody complied with that. Okay, so we're not talking specifically about what happened in this case. If you are selected as a juror, you will then hear the facts of the case through testimony and evidence and then make a decision. So we're kind of having a hypothetical discussion here. So you have thoughts about when somebody gives information, but it's either incorrect information or they don't update that information, whether or not that should be a violation of the law.
Yeah, I mean, if they gave information and it's the wrong information, then they're being deceitful. They're falsifying records, so therefore they broke the law. Part of that. If they gave information.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Griffiths, are you raising your hand? Go ahead.
I mean, in a sense, it's almost the same thing as being on probation after being incarcerated. On probation, you're required to report, you're required to go in, you're required to update everything. If you move, you're required to update your probation officer or whoever is in charge at that point of your whereabouts and everything.
Right.
To where you are moving.
Right.
If you don't report on probation, that's a violation of your probation.
Right, then your probation officer doesn't know where to find you, is that right?
Why wouldn't it be a violation in the same terms of the sex offense?
Okay, right, thank you. All right, anybody else on that topic? All right, I want to thank everybody who is volunteering to discuss. Sometimes we have people who do not like to talk, and then I have to start calling on people, and I don't think anybody really likes to be called on. So I want to thank everybody who's volunteering. All right, I want to move on a little bit. So does anybody have family, close family in Lincoln, living near you? And raise your hand. Okay, a lot of people. I see a hand over here from somebody I haven't talked to, Ms. Brent. Is that how you say? Okay. What family member is it?
All of my kids, my in-laws, my parents.
Okay. Do you visit any of those on occasion? Okay. How often would you say you visit any of them?
Well, my kids still live with us, but that's my son's out of the house, but he comes back 4 times a week. His parents once a week.
Okay. So does your son have a different place where he lives? Okay. And he comes and visits you about 4 times a week? Would you say that your son lives with you?
No.
Would you call his address your main address or his main address?
No.
Would you call it his residence in any way? Other people whose hands I saw. Here, right in front, Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Okay. What family members do you have living?
All the ones I currently have contact with. My father moved to Iowa for a job. See him when it works, but other than that, all the family I have contact with lives here.
Okay. So is it siblings, another parent?
2 siblings, mother, grandfather.
How often do you go visit those people?
Me and my 2 siblings live together in a house across the street from my grandfather.
Okay,
We visit him a few times a week. I ride my bike over to my mom, make sure she's okay, stuff like that.
okay. So how often did you say you visit your mom?
Yes,
How often would you say you go there?
it varies, maybe 2-3 times a week.
Okay, so you see your mom 2 or 3 times a week. Would you say in any way that her house is your residence?
No,
Would you call it your main or physical address?
no.
Does anybody here know what the word transient means? I see a few hands. I'm gonna try to pick somebody I haven't talked to yet. Did I see you raise your hand, Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Tell me what you think transient means.
Doesn't have an address.
So doesn't have an address, maybe. Okay. I saw other hands too. I'm trying to, can I see hands again? I'm trying to remember who I haven't spoken to. Up here in front, Mr. Schoen. What?
Oftentimes homeless.
Okay. Maybe they're living kind of couch to couch, staying with different friends. All right, one thing that I forgot to ask earlier, does anybody here know anybody else that is on the panel? Any of the other potential jurors? Go ahead and look around. Okay, I see a couple of hands. I'm going to start up front with Ms. Brent. Who do you know?
I know Elliot and then Dave Beckner. I don't know. Might be the other one.
Okay, could you say those names again for me, please?
David Beckner and Elliot Rossi.
Okay. How do you know Mr. Beckner?
We used to go to church together.
Okay. Is there anything about that relationship, how you know Mr. Beckner, that would affect your ability to serve on a jury with Mr. Beckner? Did you say no? Okay. We also have to make a record, so. So you're saying no. So knowing Mr. Beckner, you would not have any hesitation to speak your true opinion, maybe in deliberations, and stick to your own opinion. Is that correct? Okay. And then the other one you said was Mr. Grossi? Grossi, thank you. How do you know Mr. Grossi?
We go to church together.
Okay. And then same questions for him. Would that affect in any way your ability to serve on a jury with him?
No.
Okay. So now I want to go directly to Mr. Grossi. Do you know Ms. Brent? Okay. And then so same questions with you. For you, with that relationship, how you know Ms. Brent affect your ability to state your true opinions and, you know, stay true to your true opinions during jury deliberation?
No, I also know Mr. Becker.
Okay, the same way through church?
Yeah.
Okay, then same question for Mr. Beckner. Would that in any way affect your ability to serve on a jury with him?
No.
Okay, so now let me find Mr. Beckner.
He's
in the other room? Okay, thank you. All right, was there anybody else who knows somebody else on the panel? Mr. Hall?
Mr. Pinkerton.
Okay, how do you know Mr. Pinkerton?
through work.
Okay. How do you know him through work? I'll tell him you raised your hand. Or maybe you didn't, I didn't see it, sorry. How do you know Mr. Pinkerton through work?
He worked for a client of mine.
Okay, he works for a client of yours?
Yeah.
Where do you work?
Sampson Construction.
Okay, so you work for Sampson Construction, and one of Sampson Construction's clients employs Mr. Pinkerton?
Right.
Do either of you have any kind of supervisory role over the other one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, not the other one, no.
Okay, just over somebody else at your work. Okay. You mentioned that his work is a client of your work. Would there be anything about that client relationship that would make you nervous to have a different opinion than Mr. Pinkerton?
I would think so, but it's hard to say what it said.
It is hypothetical. I mean, to be blunt, would there be anything in you that would be afraid that maybe Sampson would lose that account if the two of you had completely different views on what happened in this jury?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay. Do you ever work directly with his employer?
With his employer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So are they one of your accounts?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is your job at Sampson Construction?
Senior project manager.
Okay. So now, so you're saying you don't know, basically, is that right?
I just, hard to answer, but, you know.
Okay, thank you.
hard to say.
All right, Mr. Pinkerton, I'm going to ask you some of those same questions. So who are you employed by?
Dorming network.
Okay. And what is your position there at that employer?
Chief Information Technology Officer.
Okay. Have you ever worked directly with Mr. Hall?
Yes, on a regular basis.
Okay. So is there anything about that relationship, that professional relationship, that would make you unable or question whether you'd be able to stick to your own opinions during the deliberation process if you were on the same jury as Mr. Hall?
I don't believe so.
Was there anybody else here who knows anybody else on the panel? No, seeing no hands. All right, then I'll move on to my final questions. As you know, this is State of Nebraska versus Idris Khalaf. He has been charged with a crime, and at the end of this trial, the members of the jury will have to find whether or not he is either guilty or not guilty. Is there anything, either philosophically or because of your religion, anybody who believes that they would not be able to sit, hear the evidence and reach a verdict and find whether or not he is not guilty or guilty? Anyone? Mr. Schwartz, I haven't heard from you yet today, so I'm going to pick on you. Is there anything about that decision that gives you pause, makes you concerned?
No.
No, okay. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Packard.
Quite honestly, the decision gives me pause every step of the way. But I think that my ability to be fair is not in question, but everything else is.
So when, I guess giving you pause is a very general term. So it's an important decision, is that correct?
Yes, I would think very hardly on everything said
Yes.
before I came to any conclusion.
In order to reach a decision beyond a reasonable doubt, you want to think about it and give it fair consideration, right?
Yes.
But do you believe that ultimately you would be able to make a decision either guilty or not guilty?
Yes.
Same questions to you, Mr. Dean. I don't know that I've spoken to you yet. Any belief that you would not be able to reach that final decision?
No.
All right, I want to thank you all. Oh, excuse me, did I see a hand? No? Okay. I want to thank you all for listening to my questions and answering my questions very much. And I have nothing further. I pass it to Mr. Koss.
Thank you. And Mr. Sacco.
Good morning, folks. Usually people can hear me pretty well. If you can hear me, raise your hand. You're all raising your hand. So I'm going to give you a tip here. People who participate get chosen less to be on a jury. So if you want out of here, answer a lot of questions. I want to start though with this. I don't think anybody recognized me previously when the judge went through it, but I think I might have met a couple of you. Mr. Laws?
That's it, right?
Yeah, did we meet years ago?
Yeah, you're my lawyer a couple times.
And is any part of that, would it cause you to not be able to be a impartial juror?
No, I'm good.
All right. And Mr. Griffiths, we spoke when you were shot and still in the hospital.
Oh, geez, yes, I believe my Uncle Nick had contacted you and come up with a document stating that the police could search my house, but that they were unable to charge me for anything if they had found anything incriminating.
So I helped you just in a really small, limited way. Do you remember that?
Yeah, spoke for I believe it was about an hour and a half, we were in the ICU.
Yep, you look a lot better now.
Well, thank you. To be honest, no, don't take offense to this. I didn't recognize you.
But you were pretty drugged up, so I don't take any offense at all.
I tell you what, they had me on some stuff, but thank God that's all done and over.
And for those that can't see, you're in a wheelchair from that gunshot injury, correct?
Right, yes, sir. I'm paralyzed I'm a T11, T10, T11, but that is from about an inch above my belly button down.
Okay, doing okay?
Oh, yeah, but a whole heck of a lot better than I was then, and I'll tell you what, it came to terms with it. I'm doing better in life now than I could have ever even thought I would have while I was walking.
Good. Any part of that meeting me for an hour and me doing that work for you that would cause you to not be able to be an impartial juror in this case?
No, sir. What the fact of the matter, when it comes down to it, the facts are the facts of the case, and that's just what it is what it is. There, nothing between our interaction was nor negative nor positive to influence anything else.
And let's talk about that, the facts of this case. So beautiful part is Ms. Murphy asked you guys 95% of the questions that I would have asked, so I'm not going to be standing here for very long. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions. But she told you this is a sex offender registration violation case. Does everybody remember that? If you remember that, raise your hand. Okay, then. Mr. Dean, did you raise your hand? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Does everybody here read the English language? If you do, raise your hand. Does everybody here understand the English language? If you do, raise your hand. Ms. Hofeld, I'm going to break into my next questions with you because I think with your job, you're particularly well suited to handle this. What is your employment, Ms. Hofeld?
I work for the state of Nebraska as a parole officer.
Okay, and what do you do on a daily basis?
Supervise clientele who have been released from prison.
Okay. So we know that my client, Mr. Kaloff, is a registered sex offender, correct?
Correct.
Do you think that people are on the sex offender registry shouldn't have the same constitutional rights that the rest of us have?
They should have the same constitutional rights as the rest of us.
Should the state still have to prove that they're guilty of something?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that. Ms. Garcia Gutierrez, do you know what the burden on the state is today? Like, what do they have to prove that he kind of did it, or what's the burden?
Just proving if he's guilty or not guilty of the violation that she gave, for example, of like falsifying an address, a home address or not.
Okay, or providing an address. Okay, is that a yes?
Yes.
Got to say yeses or nos because they're keeping a record. Does anybody know what the specific burden on the state is? At what level they have to prove this today? Is it Mr. Zaczek?
Zaczek.
Zaczek, okay.
Yeah, I think beyond a reasonable doubt.
What does that mean?
It means that if there's any doubt that a reasonable person would have that the person didn't commit the crime, then you cannot say they were guilty. You have to say they're not guilty.
Okay. Anybody else on what beyond a reasonable doubt means? I'll pick on someone then. Mr. Moss, what does beyond a reasonable doubt mean?
Beyond a reasonable doubt, there's no question that he did in fact falsify it.
You just know it to be true.
Yes.
What is that?
Well, that's the American flag and the Nebraska flag.
But how do you know it's the American flag?
Stars and stripes, red, white, and blue.
But you can't see all 50 stars, can you?
No.
You can't see all the stripes.
No.
But you know it is.
Correct.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes.
Okay. So as you came in and sat down today, who thought, I wonder what this guy's guilty of? Anybody think that? Is it Mr. post?
Yes,
Tell me about that. What'd you think?
I mean, this is my first time ever having jury duty, so obviously when you're just standing there in the hallway, you're thinking, why am I here? Why is this person guilty? What's the trial gonna be like?
Now, do you understand that because he's charged with something means that that's not evidence of anything?
Yes.
And does everyone understand? If you understand that as he sits there right now, he's innocent, raise your hand. Is there anybody who doesn't think he's innocent as he sits there right now? Is there any burden on him today to prove anything? Ms. Campbell?
For him to prove something?
Yeah,
No.
the burden is entirely on the state. Mr. Griffiths, you raised your hand?
Yes, I was just saying that with the burden being there, the burden's on the state, but with the charge, prior charges, with the sex offense, being having to be registered, it almost makes the burden almost transfer in a sense, to where it is on the state because it is a state law that requires a sex offender to be on record for that. But at the same time, with that being said, with a prior charge or conviction of a sex offense, that therefore brings that burden onto that person to follow that after law.
Okay. Could we agree, though, that the burden is on the state to prove he did something wrong according to the Sex Offender Registration Act?
100%, because a person is innocent until proven guilty. In the United States and America, that's what it is. You're innocent until proven guilty. You have to have facts and evidence proving a person did something or did not do something to prove them guilty or innocent for a crime.
Okay. Mr. Is it Ariano? Ariano. Okay, I got it. So when questioned, you said if he put forth some effort, I think was the term you used. Do you think the state should know their own rules and regulations?
I think what I meant by that was like, I don't know, I sort of started thinking with asking about, if you lived with your parents or visit your parents multiple times, where technically is your place of residency. So in terms of like that type of effort, maybe it could put in with like just another place with like their parents, like just getting down to the details of that. Is technically what I meant.
You bring up an interesting thing now as I'm thinking about it. Could I live with someone, but if they don't have a bedroom, could I live on their couch?
Depends if you're living with them for a majority of your week, right? If that's your place of residence, I don't think a bed or a bedroom necessarily defines that as being, your house. The house doesn't have to have a bedroom.
Where you sleep is where you live.
Yeah.
Does everybody agree with that? You don't have to have a bed. Where you sleep is where you live. Is there anybody that doesn't? Mr. Hall, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, if you're a grown adult, you should have some sort of an investment as to where you're staying. Just because you're laying on a couch doesn't mean that is your residence. You have to have some sort of ownership or some sort of
rental agreement.
yeah, something in place. I mean, not necessarily an agreement or anything in place. You need to have some sort of ownership that makes you take care of that place or.
Well, and I'm getting caught up on the word ownership. If I was there, staying there every night, does that show that I'm living there?
What do you mean by that? Like how long?
Is there a statute?
6 months.
6 months? I don't know. I can get into that.
I'm just asking if I'm taking care of someone that lives there, but there's not a spare room, so I sleep on the couch, am I living there? If I sleep there every night?
If you're saying for that long a time, you could say that, but are you getting mail at that residence?
I don't know.
Are you having anything sent to that residence?
I'm just asking if I'm sleeping there and staying there.
I've got a question before I can answer that question.
I mean, what do families do that have, extended family and they're all living together in an apartment or a small house because they don't have a lot of money? If you don't have a bedroom, does it not count? Mr. Is it Zacek?
Yes.
You're nodding your head. What do you think about that?
Yeah, personally, I disagree with the last speaker. I think, I can see where he's coming from, but in certain cases, yeah, to your point of extended family, as well as, different circumstances of people like, people with disability, different people who can't necessarily be fully independent, and just because they are not living on their own, or perhaps they're not able to pay or afford any rent or contribution, it doesn't mean that's not their place. It doesn't mean that's not their home just because of their particular circumstances.
Mr. Griffiths, I'll call on you one more time.
Sorry, sir.
That's
You could almost take squatting, for example. If a person sits somewhere or stays somewhere for so long, it's considered as squatting. They don't need to be on a lease or anything to technically consider that as a residence legally. They have to be evicted at that point.
Mr. Hall, I want to go back to you. If the law defined residence as a certain set of parameters, would you follow that?
Yeah, I think then you've got a parameter to follow.
So you could put aside any personal thoughts you may have to follow the law.
Yeah.
Mr. Pinkerton.
Is that clearly defined comes to my mind. I think back to college situations where I had roommates who paid rent but were never there. They were living elsewhere. But it was our address, the apartment address, their address.
Did they get their mail there or what was the deal?
Yeah.
But they paid full rent.
Paid full rent, but they spent most of the time at their girlfriend's house.
Lucky them. I don't
Yeah,
know. What to
so I don't know. It creates a doubt in my mind, the questions you're asking about what that situation would be defined as.
Well, and so I just want to say this, if the law defined it, could you follow the law?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's really the question here. So you've all said you can read the English language and you understand the English language. So knowing that this man is on the sex offender registry, can you put aside any feelings you may have towards that and follow the law? If you can, raise your hand. And I need to look at every single one of you, so just give me a second. Thank you. I have a few specific questions. Mr. Is it Schoen?
Shane is away for now.
Shane, oh, Mr. Shane. You're a retired social worker.
Yeah.
From where?
I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Okay, what did you do there?
I was a counselor,
Okay.
team leader.
Mr. Ogg, you're retired?
Yeah,
What did you do for a living before you retired?
I did education with the University of Nebraska.
Okay. What kind of education?
I taught pesticide applicators how to apply pesticides safely.
Farm stuff.
Part of it, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone think they already know the outcome of this case? I always end with the same final question. And through the years, the answers have gone down, down, down because people don't have them anymore. But does anyone here have a bumper sticker on your car? If you do, raise your hand. Mr. Shane, what does yours say?
I'm a Vietnam veteran.
Okay.
And what's that?
Thank you for your service. Anybody else with a bumper sticker? Mr. Is it Schwartz?
Yeah, it's, well, it's in my mom's credit card, but
She has one more there.
Okay, anyone else? Ms. Compton?
My full car is a sticker. I work at Revolution Wraps.
Oh, that's right. So you have a Revolution Wraps
Yeah,
wrap?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. She's magically paper. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, as I stated earlier, in district court, we have 12 person juries. Today, we're going to choose 12 plus 2 alternate jurors. That's mainly because of COVID and some of those things that may cause somebody to have to quarantine or whatever the case may be. In our legal system after voir dire, each party has the right to simply choose a certain number of people from this panel not to serve as a juror on their case. They don't have to give the court or the other side a reason. Indeed, they don't have to have a reason. They simply have to strike a certain number of people from the panel so that we get from 30 and those in our overflow room as well, so that we can reduce that to 14, which is our 12-person jury and 2 alternates. An alternate juror is a person who will sit with the jury throughout the entire case. In the event that something happens to one of the 12 jurors, rendering that person incapable of continuing to serve, an alternate juror will be asked to step in for the disabled juror. And if all 12 jurors are ready, the alternates will be excused at that time. And we'll keep your identity a secret until that time. This is just to ensure that everyone's paying as careful and close attention as they can to the evidence and the witnesses that are going to be before you. Sometimes we've found that if we designate somebody as an alternate and they're not, they think that there's probably a good chance they're not going to have to deliberate, they don't pay quite as much attention to the case. So, and neither you nor anyone else will know why you're being stricken or kept, and you should not concern yourselves with any reasons or motives. They simply have to strike a certain number of people from the panel. She's going back and forth between the parties. They're taking turns striking people. So in a moment, Ms. Hussey will read the names of the people who are excused from service. And those jurors will be excused as well as the folks in the overflow room. And we thank you for your time and attention and coming down this morning and participating in our jury panel today. We want Liz to get her steps in today, but we don't want the accidentals. She's getting her steps, make sure. Okay, she's going to read the names of those who are excused.
Jared Packard.
Could you speak up a little?
Yep, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna go row by row, so you'll know then. Jared Packard, Jana Campbell, Kenneth Pinkerton, Nick Nersesian, Tyler Zacek, Katie Damgard, John Moss, Scott Kreikemeyer, Jose Ariano, Jerry Griffiths Jr., Justin Hall, Joel Regier, James Laws III, Caleb Christensen, Albert Poteet Jr., Clyde Ogg.
Okay, so if you heard your name, you can now leave, and we thank you for your service here this morning.
Thank you.
I don't think you'll be called again. This is the second week of the jury term, so just keep an eye on your phone, but you're probably free to go. Thank you.
Or just go tell them they got me parking passes.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we don't need parking passes.
So let's see if we've got the right number. Yep. All right, so those of you who are still here are going to be our jury for this case. And we'll be reconvening upstairs in courtroom number 30 at 1:30 today. And so we'll ask you to leave at this time, and then we'll go up and reconvene in courtroom number 30. Before I let you go, I'll go ahead and swear you in. If everyone will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you and each of you solemnly swear or affirm that you will well and truly try and a true deliverance make in the case between the state of Nebraska and Adris Koloff under penalty of perjury? So please answer, I will.
I will.
All right. Then we'll go ahead and give you your very long lunch break. But before I let you go, I have to remind you, you're not to discuss this case among yourselves with anyone else, either in person or through the use of an electronic device. Do not listen to any conversation about the case. Do not do any of your own research into anything involved in the case. Do not consult any reference materials or use any electronic devices to obtain any information about anything involved in the case. Do not read, watch, or listen to any news reports about this case. And do not go near any of the locations discussed in this case. And do not form or express an opinion on the case until all the evidence has been received and the case is submitted to you for your decision. With that, we'll be in recess until 1:30. Thank you.
You said it was 30?
Yes, courtroom number 30. It'll be, I think you'll want to gather in that public lounge once you get off the elevator, and then Ms. Hussey will bring you into the courtroom and have you seated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I know we didn't have to use anybody in the overflow room because I was getting messages the whole time that they couldn't hear. It was freezing up. It was.
I thought I heard somebody talk through that at one point.
They did at one time. I was like, oh, I'm not sure that's supposed to happen. Is there anything else we need to take up on the record? Anything? Okay, we're off the record for sure then. And so did you